think, that year. So it's been, you know, nearly 2 years in the making to get this book out in the world. So yeah, it's really incredible. It's really surreal. I know that around this time last year, when COVID kind of became this, you know, no one knew what was going to happen, I remember thinking, is the world even going to be here in a year? You know, so
Oh, no.
thankfully, you know, the world is still here. But yeah, it's been a journey, and like you said, in so many ways. And thank you to everyone for coming on that journey with me. It's really, I don't have words for how it feels right now to be launching this book.
Yeah, and it's a bit different this time around because of COVID, that it's a virtual event, but we're so glad to be able to speak to you even through this medium. So that's awesome. For those of you guys who haven't read Prison Healer yet, aside from the keen beans like myself, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown on what it's about?
Yeah. Okay. So if I had to give it an elevator pitch, I would say that The Prison Healer is about a 17-year-old girl who has been locked in a death prison for the last 10 years. And when she's finally given the chance to earn her freedom, the cost could be her very life. So throw in a few things like a surly but protective prison guard, a lovable young assistant, a plague, again, sorry, I wrote it before COVID, a charming love interest, and then some magical elemental trials, and there's rebels and there's royalty, and all those kind of fantasy things all mashed up together to create this one book. And there it is.
Yay! I'm so excited for everyone else to read it as well. It's definitely one of my favorites that you've written, and that's saying given
you.
I've read a lot of your other books. So basically, I've heard that Zahlendoff prison, is that how you pronounce it?
Yep.
It might be based around a real life prison. Can you talk about the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so in the middle of 2019, I was at Scribblers Festival, which is in Perth, and it's a literary festival, a school's literary festival. And I was doing some really cool events with people like Neil Schusterman and a whole lot of people who are now fleeing my brain. I can't believe I've just forgotten everyone's names, but it was a great festival. And I had one day off in between events, and everyone just kept telling me, you need to go out to Fremantle Prison. And, you know, I just kept thinking, do I look like the kind of person that visits a prison in my free time? But I just kept getting this recommendation. And so I thought, okay, fine. I would go out and have a look. And the thing about Fremantle Prison is it is a heritage listed site now. So there's no active prisoners there, but they do these incredible tours. And the thing, one of the tours that they have is this tunneling tour, because if you go down these insane ladders deep into like the bowels of the earth, the prisoners used to labor underneath the prison. They would dig out these tunnels in order to create a water source for the prison, and then later for the township of Fremantle. And so I went down the very scary tunnels, and I walked through some of these, you know, some of the ones that were dry, but there were also ones that were partially submerged still. And so I hopped in like a little canoe thing, and I paddled through them, and it was really quite terrifying, but it was also the most amazing experience. And then when I was back above ground that night, I went back and I did a night tour. It was actually a ghost tour, but I was, you know.
Oh, wow. You're brave.
I mean, it was one of those kind of, I'm a wuss, so, you know, when I say a ghost tour, I mean it was kind of a gimmicky ghost tour, and like I was so like, wow, look at all this amazing stuff, that I missed like the bodies falling from wherever, and everyone would kind of scream, but I'd be looking over there like, you know, whatever else, so I missed all the actual scares. But you know, I saw like the flogging post and the hangman's noose and the prison cells after dark and the exercise yard and all these horrific places that had so much, I don't know, they just evoked so much emotion in me. And so the whole setting of the place just really stayed in my mind. And I just kind of knew when I left there that I really wanted to set a book in a place that made me feel so much. And so that was heavily behind the inspiration for The Prison Healer, for Zahlendoff Prison.
Oh, wow. So I know Kiva, so she's basically a healer. I loved her character. She was so complex, and oh my gosh, so many motivations behind her. But what kind of other research did you do to create this healing character?
I did. It was interesting. So I did a lot of research into prisons, obviously, some really horrific, probably some of the most horrific research I've ever done. you know, because I would look into like torture and concentration camps throughout history, and I read some really horrible Amnesty International reports, and it just kind of the kind of thing that made me like gave me nightmares. But I wanted to have the setting as realistic as possible, but still in a YA. You know, like there's a lot of triggers in this book, and there's a lot of darkness, but it is still on the line of YA because it's not, a lot of it happens off page. But I wanted that to be, I thought it would be a cop-out if I just had a happy prison. So that's just not realistic. So when it comes to Kiva, I did a lot of, I looked into a lot of like plant lore and botany, and so I looked into a lot of natural remedies in our world, and then I gave them a fantastical spin, mostly so that I could use things to my, you know, so like I would come up with a drug called angel dust, and you can just kind of, there's enough of a comparison that you could figure out it's some kind of, I don't know, fantasy world like heroin kind of thing, but without it actually being that, and it can have other uses and stuff. And so I would do that with like with healing salves and stuff like that. So that was the nicer part to look into. And then the other part that I did quite enjoy research of was, so there's this thing in the Prison Healer called the Trial by Ordeal, and that is for elemental magical tasks based on the 4 elements: wind, water, earth, and fire. But those were actually based off real things in our real world. There was something called the Trial by Ordeal, and it was, you know, like the trial by fire would be like, for example, when they would like try and burn people who were suspected of witchcraft at the stake, or like trial by water was when they would try and drown people. But there was some absolutely bizarre trial things. So one of them was the trial by bread, which was what they would, if there was a holy person or a priest or someone who was considered really religious, if they had been accused of a crime, their sentence would be to eat some bread. And I just remember reading it thinking, burned at the stake, eating some bread. This doesn't seem all that fair. But apparently the reasoning behind it was that if they were guilty, their throat would kind of swell up a little bit, like that guilt would make them a little bit more like panicked, and they would actually choke on the bread, and that would be,
oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know how many of them it caught, but so,
what if they were hungry?
Exactly, can't they just
I'll take the bread?
So the trial by bread did not end up in the Prison Healer, but what? But I put yeah, I know. So I just put a magical spin on some of the other trials based off that research I did, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. I heard it's always interesting having a healer character, because I thought Kiva and her knowledge of the herbal remedies and everything, it was so unique in this case. Yeah, and it's just interesting seeing all the different kind of herbs and the applications and what she knew about it. So one thing that I love about your books is that how you create really strong heroines, and they're usually really complex. There's always something driving them. And I know Kiva herself has a bit of a darker past and a bit of grief to overcome. What do you think makes a strong heroine, and how do you see that come through in Kiva?
Yeah, I think I really like that you touched on it a little bit with what you said before this about, you know, that she's a healer, and so that makes her a little bit unique. So my other protagonist, you know, we've got Alex in the Midori Chronicles. She doesn't start out as a warrior, but she kind of becomes a warrior, and so much of her journey is about physical strength and learning how to, you know, wield a sword and how to fight, you know, and combat and everything like that. And in my Whisper series, you've got Jane Doe, who learns how to use her words as weapons, which is a different kind of, you know, warrior in a sense too. And so I wanted to go, you know, both of those are definitely considered strong female characters, not just for the physical, but also for the, you know, the mental and emotional transformations they undergo. But Kiva in the Prison Healer, you know, she has been trapped. She's been locked in this place since she was 7 years old. She was sent there with her dad. She has no idea if the rest of her family, you know, what's going on with them. They're in the outside world. Every so often she gets sent a coded note, and that, you know, it's the only inclination that she has that they're even still alive. And that, like you said, that trauma is a really good word for what she has to kind of work through. And because knowing that Zahlendoff prison, people who, it is a labor camp, it is a death prison, people who arrive there usually die within months of arriving. So she won't make connections, and she just forces everyone away. And so I think I wanted to move away from the strong female character in the sense of strong as in physical strength, and I wanted to come at it from a different kind of strength, a emotional strength, a mental strength, you know, that the whole psychological strength with her, because despite the horrors that she's been through, despite what's happened to her, she's so compassionate and she's so human, and everything she does is to help other people. And even though she pushes them away and she has trust issues that are like messed up, she'll still do everything she can to look after the people around her. And I think that takes a very special kind of strength and a very special kind of courage. And so her arc in the prison healer is I guess the growth of that, but also the acceptance that, you know, that she can also start to learn to trust people. But throughout all that, she has to just focus, you know, her focus is on surviving for another day and surviving for another day. And I guess that's what I'd like readers to come away from this book knowing as well, that, you know, that despite all the darkness in the world, there's always going to be hope, there's always going to be light, and they should always try and survive another day. So
yeah, and it's always really interesting because a lot of her days are usually always, you know, same setting, same patients to treat. But the thing that brings her light are the characters that come into her life. And even though she survived for, you know, 10, 12 years by herself, she does form a bond with some new characters that come in. Do you want to tell us a bit about the secondary characters?
I love the secondary characters in this book. So one of them that we kind of meet early on, his name is Tip. He is like T-I-P-P. He is a 11-year-old boy, which sounds horrific. Again, young people end up at this prison, not necessarily because of anything they've done, but like in Tip's case, his mother was accused of stealing and he wouldn't let her go. So when she was thrown in the prison, he was thrown in the prison with her. And Tip is Kiva's assistant in the infirmary. I was going to say the medical ward. I'm like, no, that's Medora. So in the infirmary, is it even called that? The court? I don't know what. Yeah, I'm going to say infirmary. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't remember my own book. And so Tip is just this little. He's just this ray of sunshine, and he's just a little sweetheart. And you know, and even initially Kiva even, you know, keeps him at arm's length because again, she's so worried about the people around her dying. There's also this crotchety old man whose name is Mott, and he's this morgue worker, and so he works in the morgue, and so his whole life is like, you know, and he's in the prison because I don't even remember, but something about how he used to be an apothecary and he would experiment on his patients, so he really deserved to kind of be there. Not everyone at Zahlendoff deserves to be at Zahlendoff, but some of them really do. But he's just this lovely old man who just, you know, really cares for Kiva. And then there's the new people who come in. So we've got, I mentioned before that there's a guard, and the guards at Zahlendoff are horrific, but there's this one woman who isn't as horrific, and she's just kind of watches, and she just kind of intervenes when she needs to intervene, and she's like almost a quiet protector. And then also the love interest comes in as well, and he is persistent in trying to break down Kiva's walls when she's so certain he's going to die, and she just wants nothing to do with him. She's fighting her own instincts. So that's kind of the core four in this book. I said five. I added the morgue worker isn't the main character, but he's a cool character. So the guard protector, the young boy, the love interest, and Kiva are kind of the four main characters. I feel like I've totally tangented on your question.
No, that's really good because it gives us a good rundown. Like, people of all ages, you know, appear at the Zahlendoff prison, which is really interesting. And I know insta-love romances aren't your favorite. What's your favorite type to write?
I mean, I'm okay with insta attraction. I think it's important to have that kind of initial thing. But when it comes to insta love that takes over a plot and like takes out all the fantasy elements and it's all about the romance, kind of bothers me. So definitely the slow burn. Like, the slow burn is definitely my favorite. I also really do like enemies to lovers romance. I haven't yet played with that one, so I'm keeping that up my sleeve. Because I don't think in any of my books, I mean, I touch on it a little bit in the Whisper series, but not intentionally. Like, it just happens. They're not really enemies. So, you know, but so I'm looking forward to playing that. But yeah, I kind of try and have a slow burn in all of my books just purely because I don't like it when I like to be mean to all my readers and make you wait.
Who was your favorite character to write in here? I mean, there's so many great characters that there were.
Ooh, that's tricky. This is not a very nice answer for me to give you because it's a little bit mean and it's something that you won't understand yet. But there is a character who comes into the prison healer for about a page, and his name, I'm not going to tell you his name. Actually, I can probably tell you his name.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I won't tell you his name, but now you know it's a he. And this character, if anyone who's read my Midoran series, this character is kind of like Nikes in the sense that he surprised me. He was never meant to become a main character, but in the second book, which is the Gilded Cage, and it comes out in October, this character came into it as a main character who surprised me. And so while he only had a cameo in the Prison Healer, the second book, he becomes really close with Kiva, not in a romantic sense, but in like I really, really, really love this character. So knowing what I know of the rest of the series, I would say that's my favorite character to write. But if I had to take that character out of the mix, in the first book, I mean, because he's in the first book, so I want to say that. Probably obviously I love writing the scenes with Jaren. He was just very special, and just, yeah, I really enjoyed that. But also Tip, I mean, I love all the characters. I don't have an answer.
I know, it was probably a mean question, so my bad. Both Tip and Jaren are just both marshmallows, you know? Like Kiva, she had a bit of a harder exterior, but whenever both of them came on page, it was like, oh, my heart.
I know. I mean, I kind of needed that to balance all the horror of the prison, though, because like otherwise it's just, you know, everyone's going to come out of reading the book really, really depressed if there wasn't those moments of levity and happiness. So Jaren and Tip provided those moments.
Yes, and it was wonderful. So just taking a bit of a different turn, I know because Prison Healer is a lot darker than your other books, was it a difficult process to write? I know some of the research that you did was a bit, you know, not traumatizing, but, you know, like a bit hard to read and everything. Like, what was the emotional journey going through that?
I think it was more trying to know where the line was and to figure out, so anyone who's read The Prison Healer, for an example, at the end, I won't say what it is because for anyone who hasn't read, no, not like an end. There's a scene towards the end where there is an on-page kind of a torture scene. It's where one of the characters is being whipped by another character as punishment for something. And in the early revisions of this book, I actually cut that entire chapter out and I just inserted a paragraph later that was like, this happened and now we've moved on. But as I was going through the edits, you know, because I thought, you know what, this is a little bit, this is on the line a little bit. And like, yes, okay, in my other books, I have some horrific things, like in the Whisper series, we've got all the medical kind of medical torture, I guess. And in the Midori Chronicles, in the later books, there's a lot of that kind of stuff as well. Not a lot, but you know, you don't start it there in either of those books, but that does get there. But the Prison Healer, given how dark everything is with it, it was just, I wasn't sure if it was a little bit too much. But when I pulled back and I looked at the overall arc, it was just, I realized how important that scene was to put back in there, mostly for the post-traumatic stress of it later on that I would use, you know, to bring certain characters together over that, but also going into the next book, having the trauma of that as something that bonds them as well. But also as a reminder that this is not a nice place. It's not an easy place to live through and people are dying every single day. So stuff like that was hard to, not hard to write, but hard to think about, you know, who is my target audience? And my target audience is teenagers, and what can teenagers accept, and what can, you know, the world we live in is getting darker and darker and people are seeing more and more horrific things every day, but I don't want to contribute to that and take away from someone's like innocence unintentionally. So I guess the question was how I could present those kind of themes, but in a way that still protected my readers who needed protecting, if that makes sense. So it was kind of like being careful of the responsibility I have as an author of young adult fiction, while also not babying readers too much, because, you know, you can read when someone's trying to, you know, pat you on the head, and I didn't want to come across that way either. So that was probably the trickiest thing.
I really appreciate when authors mention that there's, you know, like trigger warnings and stuff like that in their books. And I think it's been great, especially going into Prison Healer, knowing the things to expect in it.
Yeah.
There are some, you know, as you said, you know, it's a prison, there's torture scenes, there's the trials of Ordeal, which are very, very, yeah, wow.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be there.
Intense. I think that's the word I'll use. So no, it's really good. And I know, like, there's always a responsibility of, you know, what should, like, is it too much to go there? Is it harder as an author? Like, you're like, oh, I don't want my characters to go through it, but they have to move them from one place to the other?
I mean, yeah, it was difficult. But I'm going to answer this in two parts. Part of it was difficult on the logistical scale of this book. Is being sold into so many different territories, and so many different territories have different triggers to what we might have in Australia. So I found that some of the things, I had to edit quite not a few, but just a small handful of things that, like in the States, with their history of slavery, some of the parallels were a little bit too close to the bone in one of the earlier versions that I had of only just like a line here or a line there, and something that didn't even hit me as someone who'd grown up in a different country. It's kind of just like little, you know, like even a little word, like I remember my Whisper series, they didn't know what a punnet of strawberries was. It had to be called a pint. So some of the things are really like, what's a punnet? So some of the things are really minor, but some of them were like, hey, take a second look at this, because if this comes out in Poland, then it has, you know, a different kind of feel for that, you know. So that was difficult in that sense. But when I think your question was asking more about, you know, the emotional journey of the characters and how hard that was for me to put them through what they went through. Is
that your answer?
Well, I mean, I feel like by this stage, this is my 9th book that has released, and I have done some horrible things to my characters in the past. Like, and I think you just have to kind of, I don't know, I will never say I enjoy it. I'm not one of those authors who deliberately goes out of my way to make life awful for my characters, but I also won't stop the horrible things from happening to them, because I know that it's through those challenges and through those trials that they're going to grow, and it's, you know, that growth can only come from adversity, and I think that's really kind of relevant to our lives. You know, we go through some horrible stuff. We might not have to go through a trial by ordeal, but we'll go through our own trials, and we can't just sort of gloss over that as if it's never happened. We have to face it and we have to walk through it. And so I think I make sure that my characters have to go through those kind of things too, if not just for them, but for us as readers, so that we can gain courage through them. Because that's why we read books. We read them to escape and to connect with these, you know, fictional beings who might live in fantasy worlds, but, you know, they still have the same trials that we do, if in a different way. And yeah, I think it's important for us to not kind of blow that apart as if it's nothing.
Yeah, and I always walk away from reading your books feeling really empowered, as if, you know, you're on the world. So it's a really nice book. I mean, it's not nice with stuff, but it's like, I don't know, you just walk away just feeling like, yes, like I can do this, you know.
Aww.
COVID.
Hey, thank you. Well, I mean, yeah. Okay, so the first book isn't that nice because of the setting, but the second book has a that's just me stopping everything I was about to say. Insert music here.
Oh no, I did see some people ask before, but is this book so it's the first series, but is it a trilogy, or have you got a planned set of books coming out after it? Sequel?
So at the moment, so the second book is called The Gilded Cage, and it comes out in October, and there will be a third book. So this is a trilogy. The problem is I'm now, once I finish this virtual tour, I have to jump straight into drafting the third book. And given some things that happened in the second book, I'm now like, how am I going to fit it all into one final book? But it is, I'm going to have to find a way. So it is a trilogy. But the good thing about that is because of these other ideas I've had, I do love the idea of kind of spin-offy kind of things. But if I did spin-offs, they would be the kind of things that you wouldn't have to read this series in order to read. Because like anyone who's seen this book, like even just open the first page to like the map. I don't know if I can see, like there's 2 maps in here. One's of the prison, which is so cool. But this map, when I was working with a designer to come up with this, you know, I was like, but what about these other kingdoms? And the one across the sea over there, and the one, and like places that I came up with, and I'm like, I could do so much in these other places. So yeah, everything is pending, but my aim is focusing on the trilogy, getting that done, and then after that we'll see what comes next.
Oh, that's exciting. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I just love studying the maps before going in because it gives you context, and especially the one of the prison, it's like, oh, like, you know, it's so the infirmary, like anyone can access it. That was interesting as well. Okay, a bit of a weird question for you.
Okay.
If you were a prisoner at Zahlendoff prison, how would you survive?
I wouldn't. I would just die. I mean, it's very dependent, right? Depending on, so when you first get to Zahlendoff prison, you're allocated a work allocation. And so some people, like, so when Kiva first arrived there, she was sent to like the entrance block, I think, and so she just was like mending clothes and doing some other stuff that wasn't as intense labor. So that was before she became the healer. But other people are sent down into the tunnels and they have to do this horrible labor work, or they might be sent to the quarry where they have to dig aluminium, which is like it's like a mineral in this world that powers their kind of electricity. And that makes my world building sound a lot cooler than it actually is. I just needed something that wasn't electricity. So I was like, let's just come up with something that's a mineral and sounds cool. And so these, you know, or they're in the lumberyard, or, you know, some of these horrible labor allocations would, you know, they're designed to essentially to kill these prisoners because they don't get enough food, the weather is miserable, you know, it's just not. So for me, it would depend. If I'm sent to like mend clothes, I could probably survive a little bit longer than if I was sent to like the tunnels. But I think it's not even so much the labor, it's kind of your will to survive that would be, you know, difficult to kind of I guess find the strength to continue when you know that you're in this place until you die. So what's going to keep me here? And that's something that Kiva has to think about as well in her story, and something that she touches on about why it was important for her to survive, and why she's managed to survive for 10 whole years when most people do die within months. So that was actually probably quite a hard part to write, because I know that so many of my readers, you know, contact me about their own battles with mental health and things that they've gone through, and choices that they've made and choices that they've nearly made. And it's really difficult for me, and I really feel so much for everyone, because mental health is something I'm really passionate about. And so writing elements of that into this book, and that survivor mentality, and touching on that, it was, you know, it's such a dangerous thing to work through, but it's also such a powerful thing that people need to hear. So yeah, I can't even remember your question now. How long would I survive? I wouldn't survive very long.
I think it's just really interesting how in the prison that you can either interact with other people, or you can either stick to yourself, and how you created this world where there were different factions, I should say. And it depends on, and then even the warden, like, he's not the most powerful figure, but he is at the time, but then other things come in as well with the royals and things like that. So it's always interesting exploring in a fantasy world what the warden character's like as well. How did you go with creating that character in the book?
I mean, so side note, I can't help thinking of, what's his name? Is it Idris Elba? Or is that a fantasy town? The actor who plays, it is Idris, isn't it Idris Elba? Yeah, that's him. Someone's saying, yeah, that's him. I can't help picturing him whenever I think of the warden, and I don't even, so anyone who's watching, there we go, that's him. Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't read it yet, think of it like that. I don't even know, I've never had like a picture of an actor or anyone for any of my characters when I think of a character, but with the warden, like, I was just like, oh, I think I saw a picture and I was like, I've just created that person and I don't know how that. Anyway, to answer your question, so the warden, I really loved writing him because, as you said, he has power at the prison, but he's not the most powerful person in this world. And so the thing about the name of this world is Wenderall, and Wenderall is the world, but this kingdom area. So there are, I'm going to say 8, it could be 7, but I think it's 8 kingdoms that make up this continent. And one of the main kingdom is called Avalon, and that's kind of where the prison is set. But all 8 of these kingdoms send their prisoners, or send the people who they want, who are committing crimes, to this one prison. And so the warden, since he kind of is over every one of all these different kingdoms, he has this power. And so it kind of, the second book goes into a lot, there's a lot more politics in the second book, and you kind of learn that if one person wants the warden to do something, it has to be kind of agreed on by a majority of the other kingdoms, and so that becomes a problem if they don't all agree to something. And so the warden has kind of absolute power within his own kingdom of the prison. I just feel like I'm waffling a little bit, but I really enjoyed creating him because, there's times when you feel like you can relate to him and you can understand that, he's got this terrible responsibility and he's got to look after some of the worst people in existence. And you kind of find out that he tries to control his guards, that he kind of also turns a blind eye on the horrible stuff that they're doing. So you don't like him, but he seems a bit relatable in some ways, but he's really also kind of awful. And then, so the whole way along, you're like, is this a hero? Is this a villain? Is he just, He's not really either. He's just doing what he's doing, and you either like it or hate it, and that's who he is. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic.
Yeah, and what you described was exactly what I had in my head. And I love grey types of characters because you're like, do I like them? Are they good? Are they bad? And that was really interesting about the warden. So I have one last question for Lynette, and then we're going to go into a quick fire round. Okay. That's the perfect time for anyone who has questions, if you want to send it through for Lynette. So we'll start that off later if you want to address it to me. But yes, so let's, okay, one last question first. So I know we've touched on this a lot with the mental health journey and survival and everything, but what do you hope that your readers will take away from The Prison Healer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, we have touched on it a bit, but just because it's worth reiterating, it is such a dark book. It's gritty and it has some really triggering traumatic themes. And, but despite that, there is so much light in it, and there is so much hope in it. And there is, with every breath that Kiva takes, it's her will to survive another day, her will to protect the people she loves, and what she's willing to do in order to keep living and to get out and to escape. And I think that's something that we all sort of need to remember when we're going through hard times, is that, okay, we might feel trapped at the moment, maybe not in a death prison, but it might be our own metaphorical death prison, and it might feel like there's no end in sight. But with another day, there just might be an end, there just might be an escape. So don't give up, and just keep going, keep walking, keep surviving, and better times will come. So I think that's what I hope readers will take away from it.
Oh, that's a beautiful wrap up of it. Okay, so I always like to do quick fire rounds. So the would you rathers, and you have to answer.
No.
You have to answer one or the other. Okay, so I'll start off with an easy one. Fantasy or contemporary?
Fantasy.
All right. Would you rather be a healer or fighter?
Healer.
Would you rather be a royal or rebel?
Royal.
Would you rather have the fire or water ability?
Oh. So for cool factor, fire, but for practicality factor, water. Let's say water.
Okay, water. Okay, enemies to lovers or friends to lovers?
Oh, that's really hard. That's really hard. I'm going to say enemies to lovers.
Okay, yes, that's my pick as well. Plotter or pantser?
Both. It depends. I used to be fully pantser, and now I've kind of turned into a plotter. So both. But if I had to pick, probably now for the sake of my sanity, plotter. Plotter, but with room to pants, so that you got some
Yeah,
surprises.
that makes sense. Elemental magic or spoken magic?
Oh, depends on what your speaking gift is. Oh, okay. So my reasoning is, given that you don't know what your speaking gift is, unless you would tell me that I would be like a creator, in which case obviously I'd pick speaking gift. But if it was just some random, like, you could call sandwiches into being.
Abracadabra.
Yeah, exactly. If it was just kind of nothing, then I would go elemental magic because you could probably do a bit more with it. But if it was a creator or something like that, then yeah, speaking.
Of course. Dog or cat companion?
Oh, I big dog or nice cat. So, but yeah, I mean, is Toby around? Because I would choose Toby.
Oh, good. I'll tell him that. I'm sure he's my golden retriever. And
Yeah.
last one, damsel in distress or rescuer?
As in I am,
You are, yeah.
or as in I am currently, or I would like to be in a book.
Which one would you rather be?
Rescuer.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. So we've got some questions from the audience. So if you were a character in The Prison Healer, who would you be?
Woo. Okay. Yeah. So it's embarrassing, but I'd probably be Tip, purely because while he's really sunny and bubbly and really lovable, and I mean, I must stress he's 11, so I'm making myself an 11-year-old kid. He's also really quite clingy to people and he can be a bit annoying. So I feel like that's probably me.
Oh no. All right. So do you create Pinterest or mood boards? Sorry, Pinterest mood boards or Spotify playlists to create a character? And
Um,
not, what do you do to get inside your characters' heads?
So I do have a Pinterest account. I do have a Spotify account. I have used neither of them for 2 years, maybe 3, possibly 4. So I logged on the other day and I had like all these notifications and I don't know how to use it. And so they kind of disappeared. And I was like, wow, bad luck to anyone who messaged me about something because I don't even know how to access those messages. So for a while there, I did use Pinterest, especially for the Midoran books. But then at one point I forgot to lock one of my boards and it had like spoilers for something or other, and I kind of learnt from that if I'm tired and not paying attention I could give something really big away. And so I don't really, for characters I do still, I think I did early on in The Prison Healer, but not going into the second book. This answer's getting to a point where you're all like snoring. So yes, I have used them. Spotify, I've also come up with playlists, I think, before for the Midori Chronicles, but I don't tend to use Spotify as a listener. So that kind of flooded away. I get so slammed by social media stuff that I kind of just stick to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, because that by the time I've dealt with that each day, I'm like, I have no time left. But I wish I did, because I do love Pinterest and I do love Spotify, and I can't remember the other things you said. But to get in the head of a character, I don't know, I just kind of sink into them. I don't even think about it. I just kind of, you need to get to know them well enough that when something happens to them, they react in a way that is natural and organic for them, because you don't want them out of character. And you kind of just get to know them as you go along. And I tend to use dialogue and secondary characters for that. So I put people around them in order to amplify who they are and who each of them are to, by talking, you get to know someone. Like right now, we're getting to know each other through speech. And so that's one of the ways I get to know and get in the heads of my characters.
Yeah, it's always it sets up the context for them, which is good.
Yeah.
I've got a question from Paige. What character did you dislike at first but grew into the most? So I would say for Prison Healer.
Dislike at first. Ooh. Cresta. So Cresta is this character. She is a courier. So she works in the quarry. She's one of the few people who arrived at Zahlendoff as a teenager and has survived so far. And she's kind of really antagonistic towards Kiva. She threatens the life of someone she cares about. She is not a nice person, really, and she has a really strong personality. And kind of when she came onto the page, I was like, oh, I don't like her. And it's important to have those characters, but kind of as you know, as we got to know her story a bit, we learned that, you know, Kiva saved her life when she first arrived. And so things like that, as I got to know her a little bit more, and as I looked forward into the future of what, you know, what she stands for and what her motivations are, I kind of was like, oh, maybe there's more to this character than meets the eye. So she's one who I didn't particularly like at first, and quite frankly still don't particularly like, but there's room for growth there that excites me.
There's always a good antagonist, isn't there?
Yeah, I do like a good antagonist.
All right, so Inya asks, if you want a movie for the book, which actors would you want to star in it?
So Idris Elba for the Warden. Seriously though, that is a rarity for me to be able to say that kind of thing, because I don't really see people when I see my characters. I would prefer an actor or an actress because they can capture the essence of a character, not so much because they look like them or, you know, epitomize what you think they are, but the way that they move, the way that they speak, the way that they bring the character to life is so much more important than how they look. So I've never really been able to like fan cast my own books, but I'm always really curious when people do it for me and they're like, oh, what do you think this was? I'm like, oh, that would work really, really, really well. That'd be great. But I just personally, plus, you know, in complete honesty, my pop culture is so terrible that I don't even know who anyone is. So I'd be like that person with the dark hair. I think she'd be okay for the main character. Like, I don't know.
Perfect. So readers, if you guys have any characters in mind for Lynette,
yep, send them my way.
Do it. All right. This question is from Jess. If one of your characters could meet one of Sarah J. Maas's characters, who would they be and what would happen?
Ooh. So from the Prison Healer series?
Yeah. I'll say any.
Oh,
interesting.
That's tricky. That makes it too wide for me. So I'm gonna have to stick to the Prison Healer series. Otherwise, I'm like, this is like 9 books worth of people. But now my brain is going, oh, I think because I just answered about Cresta, I would love the idea of Cresta and Manon getting together. I think they'd have some pretty powerful anger issues and they would work through that really well together, and that's probably the one that's coming to mind. I think Tip would kind of try and make friends with everyone in Sarah's worlds, and they would all just kind of look at him and be like, dude,
you're too friendly.
Too friendly, you're sickeningly sweet, go away. I think Kiva would probably get along with everyone. She wouldn't trust any of them, which is probably why they'd all get along, because Sarah's characters have some pretty bad trust issues too. So.
Kiva and Urine.
Oh, they would get along really well. I think Kiva would still have trouble. Like, she'd be like, wow, this person is too open, but they're too kind. But we understand the compassion and the healing of each other. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Awesome. So another question is, did you plot the entire trilogy before you started writing the first book?
No. No. So I went into the Prison Healer. It's probably the most fully formed I've ever come into writing a book. And that's purely because in the time between 2018 and 2019, I released 5 books. And so that was Grey Veil, We Three Heroes, Whisper, Weapon, and Vardasia. And so that was 2 end of series books, and also just so much that was happening in that time period. And because I was working on all those books and so much of it was editing, I didn't have a single second spare to write anything new. And I was desperate to write something new. I kind of like itchy author fingers. And so by the time I'm hearing weird noises at my balcony, which is not something you want to be hearing at nighttime. Anyway, And so I came into it and I knew fully formed what I wanted to happen in this story from beginning to end, which is something I'd never really known before coming into a book, but purely because I didn't have time to write, I had time to plot. But going into the second book, actually rewind, when we were submitting to publishers like to know that you know what you're doing. And especially when you're starting out with new publishers. So I've got, US publishers who I've never worked with before, UK, I've never had a book out in the UK before, all these different countries across the globe who I've never worked with. Australia, I have brand new publishers here. And so everyone was like, give us a series synopsis. And I don't know an author who doesn't kind of have nightmares at that word. The word synopsis is just how to fit a full book into like a 3-page rundown. And that for 3 books in a 3-page rundown, it's just like, and to give every single spoiler away, it goes against the grain. So I had to sit down and kind of map out what I had intended to happen. And I gave it a shot. And I will stick to parts of what I came up with. But during the writing of the second book, things happened that changed a little bit from my intentions. And there's this really kind of cool thing that happens. I was like, whoa, that was crazy. And so that surprised me, but also changed the entire tangent of what I was planning for the third book. So coming into that's going to kind of be like, I had to warn my editor the other day. I'd be like, so that synopsis I sent you early on, you've lost it, right? Because we're not going back to that. And she was like, right. So no, I did not plot the whole series at the beginning, but I had good intentions and I gave it my best shot.
It happened, but then more better things happened.
Exactly.
So question from Deini, how would you describe the prison healer in 3 words?
Oh, don't go there. like as in don't go to the prison like yourself. I know I'm terrible when I'm asked to do 3-word things. I feel like I should do something better than that. The prison healer is... how would you do it, Jeann?
Let the blogger do it. Dark, inspiring, and twisty.
Oh, there you go. Dark, inspiring, and twisty. Actually, you just reminded me. There was another blogger, and this isn't 3 words, but there's another blogger that described it as, what did she say? And I loved it, and I was going to steal it. She said, it's the Hunger Games, but set in a prison with magic, royals, and rebels. And I was like,
nice. There you go.
Do my elevator pitch.
Love it. Actually, it did remind me of the Hunger Games. In some part. No. There was one scene and that was it.
Yeah, I know the scene you're talking about.
Yeah, you know. All right, Julia, asks, as a young writer, do you have any tips?
Oh, thank you for calling me young. Tips. Oh, Julia, is it because am I giving tips to young writers? Either way. Tips. I guess the most obvious one is read a lot. You can't really know what you like if you don't read a lot. So read widely, read outside of your favorite genres so that you can kind of absorb as much information as you can. And it also teaches you different kind of voices. And by that I mean like different authors have a different writing voice, and you kind of learn what you like and what you don't like that way. Because like I never wanted to be an author, I never planned to be an author, but I'd always loved reading. And so when I started writing, it was almost an instinctive kind of, oh, okay, well, I've read a lot of books, so this is how you write a book. So that's probably my biggest tip. And there's a heap of other tips. If you want more specific writing tips, my website, I have a heap of writing tips on there. So it's LynetteNoni.com/writing advice, or else just go to the extras page and click on the writing advice, and there's like, you'll get lost in there for days.
Yeah, I think specifically there was someone who was asking about what happens when you hit a writing block or a slump.
Yeah, that's on there as well. That's a good question. I do get asked that a lot. So that's also on my website in a big post about things I recommend and things that can help with that too.
Oh, that's awesome. So Sophia asks, what character from The Prison Healer would you like to be friends with in real life?
Oh, all right. I'm not gonna say that character from the second book who's in the first book for a bit, even though that is my answer. But from The Prison Healer, friends, I and I've never said this for any of my other books before, but I would like to be friends, I think, with Kiva. I think I pick a secondary character as my favorite character, but I really like Kiva's. I like who she is, and I like her character arc, and I think she would be, once you got close to her and once she allowed you close to her, I think she would be a really good friend. So obviously Jaron, who wouldn't want to be friends with him, but Kiva I think could be a really good like female companion friend. It's really,
I think once she opens up and you get to know her,
yeah,
she's loyal.
Yeah. Plus she could help you anytime you're sick or hurt.
Oh, well, perfect. Chloe asks, are there going to be any movies for any of your books that you can tell us?
Not that I can tell you. I can hint that one of my series has been optioned and I haven't yet been allowed to announce it, so I can't say which one. I can also say one of my other series, I turned down an option on it, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I just didn't love the vision that the producers had for the series, and I thought it would, there's always going to be differences in books to screen adaptations, but there was just the essence of the story I felt was going to be ripped to shreds a little bit too much, and I just thought I didn't think it was going to go in a good direction. So that was really hard. But there's, especially with COVID, it's very tricky with the adaptations at the moment. But thankfully, Hollywood is kind of opening up again now. So hopefully there'll be more news soon on all fronts there.
Oh, exciting. So I've got one last one before we wrap up. So hang on, I think I've lost it. Okay, I think it was about Midori Chronicles, if we're going to be seeing any more books in the series or any spin-offs.
Well, at this stage, I contractually can't go there. I have to fulfill my current obligations. So, I mean, I love the idea of going back there one day. I'm so, I'm so connected to that world and to the characters, and I've spent so much time there. And I do have plans for a spin-off series. It's just a matter of if and when I can legally and contractually go into them, and also finding the time to do it as well. So, yeah, I hope to one day, and I guess we just have to wait and see. So fingers crossed, but it's one of those things that's like, I can say that if we do go back into the world of Medora, that the main characters, so like Alex and Jordan, Bear and DC, they won't be the main characters anymore. Let them rest. They've had all their trials. They deserve to, have their happily ever after. So it would be different people that would be focused on, and you might get some cameo appearances from other people you know or whatever, but it would be, you wouldn't have had to have read the Midori Chronicles in order to read the spin-off kind of thing. So that's what I'll say for that.
Oh, never say never.
Exactly.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Lynette for, being part of this awesome event. And also to Kina Kunuya for hosting this event for us. And if anyone needs to pick up their copy, you can pick up a pin and signed book plates if you go into the store, if you're lucky enough to be in Sydney. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone for being such an enthusiastic crowd as well.
And thank you, Jeann, to you. You've been so amazing. If anyone watching this, if you want a fantastic book blog to follow, Jeann is Happy Indulgence. Happy Indulgence Books on Instagram. She has beautiful posts, and Twitter and everything else like that. And you'll always get some really quality content from her. So definitely check her out. And thank you. You've been so amazing with this interview too.
Oh, thank you so much. Yay. So Lynette also has an awesome, for the rest of the virtual tour, she has an awesome lineup, including one with Sarah J. Maas. So make sure you guys check that out as well.
Yeah.
Yay.